Welcome back. And Eric, we're here with the Common Liberty podcast. Load the clip.
Let's get going.
Well, the news today is filled with Iran and all of the effects on not just our military, but the world of Iran and also here at home at the airports with the TSA.
Oh my gosh.
And now we have ICE agents at airports, and they can't wear their masks anymore. So they're getting photoed and doxxed, possibly.
They are not wearing their masks. I didn't realize that.
That's right. That's right. So maybe it's a special assignment with folks who are willing to do that.
That's interesting. I know they put them in 14 airports, I do believe, including in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh and Cleveland, I think, are the two closest and largest airports to Erie.
I do have to say, it is nice living in Erie when we have three good airports within like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Like, can find perfect flight.
Right. Yeah. I'm planning a trip to Guatemala and Honduras in October, and those nations seem to be much safer than the United States right now. And although the trip's in October, I'm paying very close attention to the changes in my itinerary and the travel advisories, and especially the conditions in the airports for wait times.
Oh my God. I'm sure you'll have to be caught up whenever you do go. When were you planning again?
So it'll be the 2 weeks in the middle of October. And so September is when my attention is going to be at the highest for changes in itinerary and world politics and that part of the world.
Oh, yeah. Definitely around September, be looking out for lots of talks on South America.
Right.
We can talk about those LiDAR scans and the Amazon, all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. And of course, around that time, we're getting closer and closer to the midterm elections in the United States. And so the growing momentum of the Epstein files, the Trumpstein files prosecutions, not just in Britain, but France has held Elon Musk accountable and will probably continue to do so. Elon Musk is now facing charges in the United States for his purchase of Twitter and making false statements to alter the value of the platform. But wrapped in the middle of the ongoing conflict in Iran, the war that the president chose, is what we might anticipate in Cuba. And I understand you've done a little bit of research on the history of Cuba.
Well, I had already known a lot about Cuba. I recently found a great video by Overzealots that I'll put in the link down below. And it has been, to understand what's happening in Cuba right now, you have to go back to its history.
Sure.
And I know in America, we tend to think that the United States and Cuba got intertwined with the Cuban Missile Crisis. But it was a lot before that. And in America's most under-talked war, the Spanish-American.
Exactly, 1898.
1898, America was getting real excited because there was this revolutionary fever that was finally getting to Cuba. And in America, we have such this romanticization of, fighting against a bigger power and revolutionary and stuff. So the United States was all on board and was all willing to help it. The only thing I ever learned about not the French and Indian War, wrong one, Spanish-American War.
There's so many.
The Spanish-American War was Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders.
That's right.
And San Juan Hill. That's about all I learned about it. And
well, in 1898, there was the false flag event of the USS Maine.
Yep, the USS Maine
gave rise to tabloid journalism. I think it was called by a different name back then.
I was reading about it, and but yeah, basically tabloid journalism with what was that? famous guy that was known for it? I can't remember his name.
Well, there was a newspaper owner named William Randolph
That's it.
Hearst.
William
And
Randolph
Hearst owned a huge chain of newspapers, and similar to the modern conglomerates of radio and television, streaming and cable, popular opinion was shaped very effectively to support what was essentially a war of choice. And so we're starting to explore the history of wars of choice. And when we consider what happened in 1898 and the Monroe Doctrine and the expansion of United States hegemony in Central America and the Caribbean. For context, Cuba is about 60 miles away.
90.
90 miles?
It's 90 miles from the southern tip, from the Florida Keys to Cuba.
Okay. So 90 miles from the tip of Florida to Cuba, and that's less than the distance from Erie to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It's about the distance from Erie to Buffalo and not quite the distance from Erie to Cleveland. So the context is important when we consider the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the precursor to that, of course, was the Bay of Pigs invasion in April of 1961.
And, I mean, they had the Bay of Pigs invasion, and then after that failed, they started Operation Mongoose, which had a lot of planes dropping bombs all over Cuba, literally to commit terror attacks and try and drive the regime out. And it was only at that point where the Soviet Union stepped in and provided them weapons to protect themselves. And the Americans found out when they shot down a U-2 spy plane.
Right. That's right. There's an important history to the Bay of Pigs invasion that links the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about in January of 1961, almost hinting that this invasion's already planned. It didn't happen overnight. And the troops at the Bay of Pigs invasion were actually trained in Tikal, Guatemala. The Central Intelligence Agency constructed an airstrip in the Guatemalan jungle and helped the University of Pennsylvania begin its excavation of the city. The archaeological and academic study that was done in conjunction with Guatemalan authorities, Guatemalan scholars, local people, indigenous people. And so Brigade 2504 was trained there, and the CIA shipped in all the logistics. And when the training was done, when they felt they were ready for the Bay of Pigs invasion, it was the United Fruit Company that harvested bananas in Guatemala and then sold them all around the world, especially in the United States. But when the Bay of Pigs invasion occurred, wasn't it just a really brief skirmish?
The Castro regime was able to put them down in about 3 days.
3 days.
And, like, the thing is also before the Cuban Revolution, like 90% of Cuba lived in extreme poverty with a very small elite at the top. And like after the revolution happened, a lot of people fled because they were military guys or sympathetic to Batista's regime. But another thing is JFK in 1960 speech said Batista murdered 20,000 Cubans in 7 years, a greater proportion of the Cuban population than the proportion of Americans who died in both world wars. The people of Cuba, and long before that, were under constant repression and colonialism and slavery. And, you know, right when the Spanish arrived, they started subjugating the Taino people, and like there was
the indigenous people.
And Cuba has a long history of standing up against these colonial powers over 500 years.
You're right.
And like when the land reforms that took place in Cuba after the revolution, people really saw it as change, and they were not going to go easily into the night after that.
I think there's some significant parallels between the Bay of Pigs invasion and the current president's invasion or war of choice in Iran. And some of the reasons for the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion was, of course, the failure of the United States to establish air superiority. And it was also a matter of the United States and the CIA's poor planning to establish a popular uprising against Fulgencio Batista and the folks who were in power at the time. And so it became very, very difficult for the other world power at the time, Russia, to ignore the opportunity and to develop an ally just 90 miles away.
And when we found out years later that there were also nuclear weapons aimed at the Soviet Union in Turkey and in Italy,
Right.
which were removed, but they weren't allowed to talk about it because God forbid Kennedy get embarrassed.
Right. Right. Well, the Bay of Pigs invasion certainly was embarrassing for the United States and an important lesson. And as we compare that to the recent conflict in Iran, the shooting down of an F-35 fighter jet.
It wasn't technically shot down, it was shot.
Okay.
They were able to target it, it seems like, but it did make an emergency landing. I think in somewhere in Iraq, but it was pretty surprising that our $2 trillion invisible plane was targeted, and that I'm sure a lot of people in the aerospace community are probably shitting their pants right now after seeing that.
It raises the question, what kind of technology is being brought into Iran by other nations?
I mean, I don't even know if that's completely the question. You know, after the Islamic Revolution, you know, they were cut off from that and built their own arms manufacturing. They're the ones sending Shahed drones to Russia.
Right.
You know, one that we copied with the Lucas drone, almost 1-to-1, which was a little weird. You usually don't see Americans copying like a much smaller country's technology. But like, I think it just goes to show that the Iranians are very prepared. And like, another thing that should be pointed out is they don't have nuclear weapons. Ali Khamenei didn't want them.
Right.
They kind of kept some of the parts around, and like that was a big issue, but like they didn't have any. There was no reason for this war. And, you know, I think of all these places that, you know, had U.S. installed dictators. You know, Cuba, Iran with the Shah. You have Pinochet and Perón in Chile and Argentina. The list goes on forever, you know.
Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines.
Yep, Marcos in the Philippines. It's another one we don't talk about but it seems like, you know, the United States has the same strategy everywhere. We end up arming a bunch of rebels and going, hey, we're going to put you in charge as long as you do what we say. And
I think it seems likely
the Iran-Contra scandal.
Right, the Iran-Contra scandal, where Ronald Reagan was a cocaine dealer and Oliver North was his mule. And Richard Secord took the fall in 1987, according to the congressional record. I think there's just less likely of a chance that there will be a popular uprising in Iran. And that will contribute, I think, to the difficulty of the invasion, not just the exceptionally mountainous terrain, but the people probably resent the United States attack much more so than the oppression of the Iranian regime and the Revolutionary Guard.
And we also have, we can see this pretty recently in history as well. If you go back to Cuba, not Cuba, Venezuela, while Maduro was there, it was during the first Trump presidency, I do believe. There was big push for regime change in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had this guy that was out there. He was young, he was popular, and he announced he was working with the U.S., and the whole thing fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know the tactic. It's been used everywhere.
Right.
Like, it's easier to actually point on a map in South America the countries that we haven't done this to. And I think there's only one. And I think it's Bolivia. But I could be wrong. I could be horribly wrong. Probably did all of them.
Bolivia actually had a war with Germany in the
Really?
20th century. Yes.
I didn't know that.
I visited Bolivia in October of 2024.
Okay.
And I had an amazingly educational and really joyous 2 weeks almost in La Paz. And then I spent some time on Lake Titicaca, especially the Isla del Sol, visiting the Quechua Inca ruins. And then
That's pretty high up, isn't it?
Yes, it's about 13,000 feet. I think Mount Illimani that looks over La Paz is the highest point in Bolivia. But Lake Titicaca, is a long time area of indigenous populations, whether it's the Quechua that emerge in Peru, or the Aymara people of Bolivia, or the Pucara people who lived at the northern end of Lake Titicaca. And of course, all three of those groups really are responsible for introducing the potato to the world so that we can be commentators.
I saw an excellent video with Gordon Ramsay. I'll put that one in the link too. But he was in South America, and he was talking about all the different potatoes and how they would grow different varieties at different heights and altitudes.
Yeah.
And it would change the color. So sometimes you get like purple potatoes at a certain altitude. Yeah. I love potatoes.
Yeah. The Quechua people domesticated about 4,000 varieties of potato and 2,000 varieties of corn. When I was in Peru in 2019, I had a meal in Ollantaytambo, which is one of the places you visit on the way to Machu Picchu. And the kernels of corn in the dish we ate were like the size of quarters. They were enormous compared to what we see.
I love food variety.
Yeah.
But let's not get too off topic.
Sure.
Again,
we see these parallels between Cuba and the Bay of Pigs.
Oh, yeah.
And the failure to instigate a popular uprising. In Iran, we can see that America has established, the United States Air Force has established air superiority. However, the Strait of Hormuz is really more of the focus, not just because of the air drones that Iran has developed, like the Shahed that you mentioned, but also the aquatic drones. And as we think about how troops are going to get from Karg Island, this staging operation, our first and foremost concern is the safety of American troops and bringing them home safely as soon as possible. But we also need to consider the history of the Iranian people and their ethnic distinction from the surrounding nations.
They are Sunni, right?
I believe they might actually be Shiite.
Shiite, okay. I get them mixed up sometimes.
We should probably Google it.
We'll Google it.
I believe the Shiite is the minority sect and the Sunni are the majority sect. But in Iran, previously the Republic of Persia, we refer to the ethnic Farsi or Parsi people.
It was Shia. You were right.
And of course, in antiquity, the Persian people worshipped in the Zoroastrian religion with the Ahura Mazda sacred text. And so that history is met with the beginning of the Muslim culture. And so it becomes understandable that in Iran, you have a slightly different flavor of Islam compared to the rest of the Arab world, because Iran has a small but meaningful Arab population.
Yes. From my understanding, the Shia religion has a lot of clerics. Then there has been a long history of supporting groups against overwhelming powers. This is, I mean, Iran is, pretty much the birthplace of civilization, like Egypt, Mesopotamia, that, that area.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That whole region, especially the southern part of Saudi Arabia, and as we look at the Gulf of Oman and where Qatar is located, the nation of Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, that whole region has long depended on the hospitality culture and the Bedouin culture. And so the entire perspective on negotiating and resolving problems diplomatically is quite different than a businessman like the current president in power. And so I'm very concerned that these parallels between the Bay of Pigs and Iran are going to resurface again, because we're using the United States, the CIA is essentially using the same playbook. But we find ourselves in a changed world, a post United States and Russia world, and the world order is changing. The centers of power are relocating, and the technology that reinforces those centers of power is going to affect the United States' influence and hegemony in Central America, in the Caribbean with Cuba, and of course the north of South America in Venezuela.
Yeah, and with the Monroe Doctrine, or should I call it the Donroe Doctrine?
We may as well right now.
That's what Trump's been calling it, the Donroe Doctrine.
The Big Shoe Doctrine.
This is the Monroe Doctrine, for those who don't know, is the United States foreign policy position that opposes any foreign interference in the Western Hemisphere, that has been used since and been reinterpreted many times to justify intervention in South America, most recently with Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably going to do it again soon with Cuba.
The expansionist tendencies of Israel are on full display now also.
And, it just goes back, like, you have Batista, who was installed by the Americans and CIA. You have in Iran, you had Reza Shah installed by the British and Kissinger.
Mm-hmm.
And then in both cases, you had two uprisings, one theocratic and one socialist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are a lot of similarities in these two places. And, like, the way that we do it is, like, it's kind of an American playbook. It's almost the same thing every time, false flag, sometimes a false flag, install a dictator, get, armed protesters, usually protesters or a violent group, to come in, kick out the government. We did it with Pinochet, Perón.
Panama is probably the only meaningful, successful example of regime change that the United States completed by removing Manuel Noriega. And of course, the Panama Canal is a crucial shipping point. Mexico has started to develop a shipping lane, not a canal, but a
train system, right?
Right.
They're going to be like, and there's some historic context to that, I think, too. They used to have some kind of, they were trying to set something up, and then the Panama Canal was like, yeah, that's way better. But now there is such a long waiting time to get through the Panama Canal. They're trying to think of something different.
My union brothers and sisters in SEIU operate the Panama Canal.
Ooh.
So it truly is Service Employees International Union. And so the solidarity we have with people around the world is crucial to understanding why these conflicts are happening. As we look at the conflict in Iran and what it's doing to airports in the United States, we're also seeing the price of gas skyrocket.
Was it over $4 today?
I don't think it's over $4.
It was $3.99 yesterday.
Right, yes. I haven't been out to check the prices today in Erie, Pennsylvania as of March 24th, 2026.
I forgot to look on my
But
way here.
we're all looking at that because we know that the truck drivers who deliver groceries all across the country, over-the-road truckers, frequently, their fleet sales are purchasing large amounts of gasoline, diesel specifically. That kind of fuel is in turn increasing the cost of groceries. So as we come back to things like the affordability crisis in the United States, the cost of groceries, the cost of fuel, all of the other side effects that
Roads. Oil affects roads. We can't, cities set out a budget for how much oil they need. If they can't buy as much oil, they can't fix as many roads. They have to start getting into like emergency, like trying to figure it out. We already have crumbling infrastructure as well.
It's ironic that there are other nations in the world that refer to the United States as an underdeveloped nation.
We're 50. I was told we are 53rd world countries in a trench coat with a Gucci belt. And
Gucci,
yeah. But no, I've heard the phrase the United States is 53rd world countries many times. I mean, I've driven across the country and I've seen some pretty poor neighborhoods, especially, our Native American friends out west are very much struggling. They are not getting the support as they need, their land keeps being taken with the, recently with a few years ago with the pipeline and
right? The Keystone Pipeline.
the Keystone Pipeline. Yes. And, that got into a whole bunch of stuff.
One important consideration for the war is not just the consumption of fuel, but also the effect that it has on the climate. And in the western part of the United States right now, we're seeing extremely high temperatures, something like 93 degrees Fahrenheit in March in California. Now, on the other hand, what we're also seeing in California is Lake Tahoe being replenished between, I believe, February 15th and March 3rd of this year. Approximately 15 billion with a B gallons of meltwater from snowfall resulting from polar vortexes melted in this recent heat wave and refilled Lake Tahoe. 15 billion gallons of water. So on one hand, that kind of extreme swing is a sign of the times.
It's, that's why they stopped calling it global warming and started calling it climate change, because it's not going to make everywhere warmer and everywhere colder. If the AMOC collapses, Britain is going to be like northern Canada. There is so much warm water that comes up from the Gulf, goes up, hits Britain, Ireland, and Norway that makes them so nice.
And in the Pacific, we see the El Nino effect this year predicted to be extremely harsh and affecting hurricanes in Central America and Mexico, in the Caribbean.
And also with just fuel in general, like getting back to Cuba a little bit, we have been doing this blockade on Cuba for since 1960. with it intensifying and
Mm-hmm.
getting, but always a blockade. Not a blockade, economic blockade.
Over the weekend, there were increasing electrical blackouts on the grid, the power grid in Cuba, including 3 times in Havana when power went out at a major hospital. And by Monday morning, in one ward of the major hospital in Havana, all 21 people using ventilators had died because of the U.S. embargo on resources. And we do want to point out that President Sheinbaum of Mexico has taken a huge effort to deliver resources and supplies to the Cuban people.
But even then, even when she does that, the United States is still threatening her. They have to manage, Mexico is not as China is telling them to screw off and sending them. I think they sent enough rice to feed the population for a month.
Mm-hmm.
But the big issue they have is they don't have oil. So there's no way to get those food to the people that live out in that mountainous countryside.
So who was Cuba previously buying its oil from?
The Soviet Union before 91, and then Venezuela.
Venezuela.
And
Interesting connection there. And that Iran also has major, major oil deposits.
And this constant push on Cuba just to this blockade drives me nuts. The UN has voted to end the blockade for 33 years straight.
Yes.
But since the United States what they are on the Security Council and they can veto, right?
Right.
And since they can veto it, it doesn't end.
It's interesting to note that when the U.S. began its war in Iran, February 28th, that was about the time that the United States took over the chairmanship position, so to speak, of the Security Council at the UN, which is exactly the playbook that Russia followed when it invaded the Crimea in 2014.
Okay.
So even though Trump makes noise about the United Nations is no longer relevant and his so-called Board of Peace is the direction he wants to go in, these decisions and troop movements and the propaganda that the current regime in the United States is promoting, it covers up only slightly for the reality that we can all see in the affordability crisis and the cost of gas, the cost of groceries, the effects on the airports. And as we bring it back a little bit closer to Erie, we can even think about the cost of fuel for pleasure craft on Lake Erie, for boats, for jet skis. When the good weather comes along in Erie between April and October, especially in the summer, Lake Erie is the place to be. And we really have to remember what a great resource we have with Presque Isle State Park.
Oh, Presque Isle's so nice. I think Lake Erie just attracts fishermen all year round, because even this winter when the lake was 96% frozen, I think it got up to.
Yep.
I would drive down there and you just saw a sea of little tiny ice fishing huts.
Right.
Little red and black ice fishing huts. And
ice fishing huts, people ice skating on the lake.
Ice skating, all kinds of cool stuff. And I even saw a really funny video of a guy pulling his boat with a lawn tractor through downtown Erie. That was kind of funny.
Right. Whatever works.
Whatever works. But
the question of fuel for pleasure craft really becomes an important issue when we come back to the subject of the Northeast Marina.
Yeah, because it just got this big grant, and who's going to be able to afford to drive up here, let alone, I do know that the United States has a lot of oil production now, a ton. I know after When did we start that? That was after.
I think the Strategic Oil Reserve was first created probably by Jimmy Carter in the
Mhm.
mid to late 70s as a result of the oil embargo in 1972, 1973.
I think it was after one of the gas prices in the 2000s when it went up real high.
With the Iraq War and
That's probably what it was. Um, I think at that point we had started drilling a lot more in the North America and Canada and stuff and
mhm,
produce a lot.
right.
So I don't know if we'll get to like 70s level of rationing, but like other countries, like Japan,
Hmm.
I was seeing didn't have oil at the pumps.
Right.
Um,
When I was in Bolivia in October 2024, there were long lines to buy gas. And I, early on in the trip, made a decision. I'm not going to rent a car. I'm going to hire a local driver who speaks Aymara, the indigenous language, and would likely get better customer service or access at the gas stations. And there were lines, long lines, over a mile in some places.
oh wow.
When you drive from La Paz to Tiwanaku, you're driving about an hour, maybe 2 hours west from La Paz. And traffic in La Paz, I'd compare that to something like 12 pythons fighting over a bowl of spaghetti. So I felt very, very lucky to have Juvenal, my Aymara driver that I met at the airport in La Paz, driving me around town, picking me up, taking me to Lake Titicaca, picking me up, taking me back to La Paz, and then over to Tiwanaku. And the emphasis on mutual aid, mutual support, and how different communities interact with each other has such a root in the native culture of South America. It's noteworthy that the Quechua people, sometimes we call it the Inca Empire, but the Inca was really just the maximum leader, the maximum ruler.
Okay.
It would be like calling all United States citizens presidents
Yeah.
and referring to the country as president. But the Aymara people also developed mining and mining silver, mining gold. And when the Spaniards found out about it, it was
Very much exploited.
exploited, avarice, greed. And one of the popes divvied up South America between the Spanish and the Portuguese. So, what is our role today in this changing world order? And we see locally people want to be able to use the Northeast Marina, and they're trying like heck to get all the slips installed in the marina by April 15th. But there's no published plan, and there's no published survey. According to the Northeast Marina Authority, on March the 18th of 2026, the survey was going to begin yesterday, March 23rd. And it is definitely a fact that the Sunshine Law applies to the Northeast Marina Authority, meaning there must be transparency both in regular meetings and operational activities. So we're seeing a distinct lack of transparency in spite of the good intentions to serve the community. And hopefully the repair and rebuild on the Northeast Marina will bring it about to the point where maybe there can be a regatta, another festival to celebrate Lake Erie. Northeast has the Cherry Festival in July to support our fire departments, and we have the Wine and Jazz Fest in September.
I do think the ERGC, or is it the EGRC? EGRC.
Erie County Gaming and Revenue
EC
Association,
Yeah, I'll never.
the EGRA.
EGRA. But yeah, they put out a plan for America 250. Maybe you should tell someone to get that regalia going and go, let's slap some,
Mm-hmm.
let's get the Niagara down here.
Right. I think that would be a wonderful idea, Eric. In 2013, we celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Lake Erie,
Okay.
which Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, one of my ancestors, played a decisive role in we have seen the enemy and the enemy is ours. It was Admiral James Lawrence who said, "Don't give up the ship, boys."
Yep. And then he died, I do believe.
Moments later. Yeah.
And then that became the rallying cry for the Niagara.
Exactly. And in the United States, the motto, "Don't give up the ship," applies even more.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can see how these international events connect on a local level, that the cost of groceries affects people who need to use SNAP benefits and also need to benefit from LIHEAP to pay for heating costs over the winter. And all these stresses and all these strains on the infrastructure in the United States are something that we certainly can't sustain for long.
We need to be focusing on our communities.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be investing in schools. We need to be investing in hospitals, away from and trying to get out of this freaking horrible thing with the big nonprofit hospitals that seem to be doing a lot of really not great care for people, pushing up rates, pushing up,
Mm-hmm.
Pushing down the amount of nurses in the field, just all kinds of
The medical industrial complex.
the medical industrial complex.
Every nation that has ever risen up and become great in human history was eventually crushed by the weight of its own material excess. And in the United States, we see this material excess most obviously in the military industrial complex. But as the world changes and the relationships between nations becomes more and more complex, and by that specifically I mean the rise of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. BRICS, yes. You see a realignment of political motivation, and one other very, very promising development is the leadership of women in major nations, not just Japan and Mexico or in Britain, other places in Europe, even though we see some of these leaders are on the right end of the spectrum, the fascist end of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so this encroaching fascism is necessary to preserve some of these military and economic relationships that are really relics of the post-World War II order.
I think it was Eisenhower said, "What keeps you up at night?" And he's like, "The military industrial complex." Because these companies place their facilities in contested districts.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in a purple district and you need something to vote your way, 10,000 people losing their job is going to get you your vote whatever way you want,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned climate change, and Mark Twain once said, "Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it."
And also, U.S. military is the largest polluter on the planet too. That's another part of that military industrial complex is we have all these ships that need maintained and just so much stuff. And then also all of the people that are needed to maintain it. And they're not just Joe Schmo off the street. These are trained machinists, these are trained professionals. And most of the work they do is running the military and making stuff that blows up after one use. And, my father was a machinist. I mean, he worked at many different places over the years. And I remember as a kid, seeing some big, shells and stuff. And that was a one-time use thing, and we ask ourselves sometimes, why isn't America making great things? Because we're making things that blow stuff up,
Well, there is some hope that the Artemis expedition from NASA,
I think they canceled it.
Well, it's in development.
Okay.
There have been launch delays, and again, we're talking about the fuel it takes to rocket around the moon, not the same as the fuel that powers the USS Gerald Ford or the USS Abraham Lincoln and keeps our sailors safe and sound, or our fighter pilots safe and sound as they land on the aircraft carriers. It's important for us to recognize how these conflicts affect the quality of democracy and a constitutional republic in the United States. And although we're in March right now, and we know that in less than 8 months we will have midterm elections, the normalization of the aggression of Immigration and Control Enforcement, ICE, the increased aggression in police tactics, the increased affordability crisis, it all creates a very interesting situation where the response of the people of Minnesota to ICE is such a crucial example for the rest of the United States. Because these midterm elections must happen, we must flip the tables together.
Mm-hmm.
We must restore order and sanity in the United States. So many people around the world benefit when the United States does good things. For example, when President George W. Bush was developing aid programs in Africa, the mosquito nets that were saturated, impregnated with anti-mosquito chemicals really helped prevent the transmission of disease in Africa. And that's something that people do remember. And we need to aspire as a nation to helping our neighbors much more consistently than what's occurring right now.
Got to go full Cuba.
Full Cuba, yes.
Full Cuba. They send so many doctors all over the world.
Right, right.
What was it? It was like, I was reading it. I was watching a video earlier, and they said it was like 400,000 doctors since 1960 to 164 countries.
Amazing.
They have like a Latin American training thing that even helped train people in the United States, all free of charge, of course. 20,000 people from the Chernobyl disaster were treated during Pakistan's earthquakes. 75% of the people there were treated by Cuban doctors.
That's amazing.
It's wild. And like,
so many good Samaritans.
yeah. And, you know, I would love to see what a country with the power of the that's a tiny little island. What can the United States do?
Well, there's a recent movie, one of the major things that the United States exports is entertainment. And there's a recent movie, Project Hail Mary, which has debuted to really, really thunderous ticket sales.
Oh, it was great.
And it's amazing. You've seen it. I've seen it. I think I mentioned when I was seeing it for the first time, there was water coming out of my eyeballs a couple times.
I don't know why that was happening.
Right. It's just a great flick. Ryan Gosling does such an excellent job, and the puppetry and computer effects for the alien are very subtle. And it adds to the humanity of all the characters. But the conflict that is driving the plot of Project Hail Mary has to do with a scientific question related to energy. So Project Hail Mary is very timely, and I definitely recommend people go out and see it. It's really heartwarming.
A visual masterpiece, nonetheless.
Yes.
You know, and
it's on par with Interstellar.
I like it. I liked it more than Interstellar. I also really liked The Martian.
Yes.
Which, was
Andy Weir.
Andy Weir wrote The Martian and Project Hail Mary. And he combines science and humor with a character that's just perfect.
Yeah.
Just perfect. And
when Matt Damon's character was growing potatoes with his own poop on Mars, there's a lot of humor in that. And Ridley Scott, one of the modern giants of cinema, directed The Martian. And I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller are the directors of Project Hail Mary. And the special effects really don't overcrowd the movie. Some people have said maybe it's a tad bit long. There is a point in the movie where you think, hey, that's a nice place for a happy ending. But
I thought it was a tad too long. But like, it's such a mild review, like a mild complaint.
Right.
I'm just like, it's like a 0.1 point off.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. When the plot turns about 9/10 of the way through the movie, it's not as much of a twist as you might think. It makes very, very logical sense in the context of the plot, but it really justifies the last 20 minutes or so of the movie in a pretty powerful way. So I definitely recommend people going to see Project Hail Mary, but also locally here in Erie on Thursday, March 26th at 6 p.m., we have the premiere of Save Blasco, A Lesson in Democracy. And this is the chronicle of a powerful grassroots movement in Erie where community members stand up to protect the Blasco Memorial Library, a vital public resource, from a controversial lease agreement with Gannon, a private Catholic university, which, of course, owns plenty of property in Erie and would certainly...
Big power player in the area.
Big power player in the area, major employer. They definitely provide high-quality education to its students. But again, its role in the community has come under question as a private institution. Why is it expanding into a public space like the Blasco Library, which, of course, is a haven for people needing to use the internet for job searches, people who want to use the Idea Lab for creation. And what's next door to the Blasco Memorial Library? Some brand new hotels, some very shiny Hampton Inn and Suites with the Oliver's restaurant on top. And they're even proposing another fancy hotel right next to it.
So many fancy hotels.
And that's where the Brig Niagara docks.
Yep. And I got to say, Erie Library is really good.
Yes.
Like, Erie has a great public library.
Such a tremendous staff.
And, like, I would rather that space be used for something more public, a more public third space, creating, they added the Idea Lab, which has 3D printers. They have laser cutters, Cricut machines, button making, just all kinds of creator stuff that you can use.
It's a safe space.
Yes. And they have a really good, like, historical area, the little Brig Niagara Museum.
Right.
And it upsets me to see it go to a private Catholic college. I would rather that be in the community. I would rather there be a town hall or something on how to use that space if it was
a meaningful
available.
town hall.
A meaningful town hall, yes.
I think I wonder what Dr. Blasco, the namesake of the Blasco Memorial Library, would think about how the space that's named after him is being used now. And even with the Blasco Library movie this Thursday, March the 26th at Harding Elementary, we definitely want to recognize the role of community members in standing up for the library. Michelle Ridge was one of the first directors of the library. And since then, people like Mary Rennie have led the library in various capacities. And the current staff, of course, has changed. We have new leadership in the county executive office. We have new leadership in the mayor's office. And so we look to Christina Vogel and Daria Devlin to navigate some of this change. with a sense of compassion for the residents that really rely on the library, not just as a safe space, but access to the internet for job searches, for learning,
Sometimes just having DVDs for people.
entertainment,
And
learning.
There's lots of good stuff at the library.
It's not all about the dollar.
Yep. But I think that's all for us today. Want to finish us off, Jeff?
Well, sure. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Common Liberty podcast. Load the clip, and we'll see you next time. I'm Jeffrey.
And I'm Eric.
Bye for now.
Have a
great
good
day.
one.